Dober večer, vsi pozdravljeni v pritličju, pozdravljeni na večeru, ki ga organizirava z Janejem Štromarjem, Socialni demokrati in z našim mednarodnim gostom z Madžarske, Balazsom. Predstavila ga bom najprej nekaj besed samo v slovenščini in vprašanje, če boste vsi v redu, da pogovor poteka v angleščini. Zaradi gosta nimamo prevoda, upam, da se bomo, če bo kakšna zagata, dobrodošli, da prekinete, postavite vprašanje in bomo skušali tolmačiti, prevajati. Pozdravljeni tudi vsi, ki nas spremljajo po internetu. Cel pogovor poteka tudi po spletu. Vesela sem, da vidim tako številčno udeležbo, pričakujem pa tudi zelo zanimiv in verjetno tudi precej vroč večer. Ne zaradi prostora, ampak zaradi teme same. And now I will switch to English. Good evening, Balázs. Welcome to have you here in Ljubljana tonight. Balázs is a Hungarian International Secretary of Socialist Party. We are also both colleagues in the PS presidency, and he is a political scientist, also in politics since 2007, if I'm not mistaken, or even, yeah, and a council in your local city town. So very active, and you see the title, this is his PowerPoint and his title of the evening, The Nature of Urbanization, but I think it's very timely to discuss about, we have several developments. I can say that for the last 10 years that I'm in the European Parliament, Hungary has been very often on the agenda, since 2010, when we first discussed about the media situation. After that, I think we had 8 resolutions, the last one this year in January, and last September, last year, we started Article 7 against Hungary. I always emphasize, whatever is happening in the case of Hungary, rule of law, democracy, freedom of media, independence of judiciary, all discrepancies or gaps in Hungary, it's not that we are criticizing Hungary, but we are criticizing clearly what Orban regime is doing in Hungary. And after the Article 7 that we launched last year in the European Parliament, this January in the resolution, again with all the institutions, we once again confirmed that the situation is even worsening in Hungary. So that's why I'm very happy to have you as a guest. We see also a lot of links between what is Fidesz party doing in Hungary and allies with our SDS that is taking over the government. Clearly with the votes, with what is the development, and maybe from your experience, we'll see how and what was happening in Hungary and how the situation is today. Janeza Janše will be moderating with me, and you are, of course, very welcome to put the questions and be actively engaged in the debate. So I pass you the floor for your presentation now. Thank you, Balázs.
So, my friend Janeza called me like a month ago that there are some developments in Slovenia and that my opinion might be interesting regarding how things look like in Hungary now and how things could possibly look in Slovenia 10 years from now. Actually, the title of this presentation shouldn't be The Nature of Urbanization. It should be you have to be careful about a couple of things if you would like to avoid Slovenia looking like Hungary 10 years from now. We have been living under the Orban regime for 10 years. We have learned a bunch of stuff. We have committed a bunch of mistakes. And we have learned our lesson now. In some of the cases, I have the feeling it's already too late. In some of the cases, we have still a couple of chances for development. But you really have to be careful from the very beginning of these attempts, which has started in 2010 in Hungary and which probably will start in Slovenia from now on. It's not a secret that one of the greatest followers of Viktor Orbán on the international level in the region is Janeza Janše, who will be, as far as I was informed, soon again the Prime Minister of Slovenia, and I am pretty sure that he will have the same things in mind like what Orbán Viktor had 10 years ago. So, very, very basic Hungarian situation. Orbán is governing for his 3rd term now. He entered power in 2010 with a 2/3 supermajority in the Hungarian parliament, although he only got 52% of the popular vote. Because of the election system, it led to a 2/3 majority of all the mandates The two-third basically in Hungarian constitution means that you can do whatever you want. And you can change your mind the next day and totally contradicting yourself again and again and again. If you have the two-third, no one has the right to stop you doing from what you want to do. And that's the key element of the Orban regime, using and misusing this opportunity of the two-third majority. Since 2010, Orban managed to win 2 more national elections, one in 2014 with 44% of the popular vote, and one again in 2018 with 49% of the popular vote. How come he's governing with a two-third majority if he clearly is not having the support of the people? Well, that's already a question about the election law. There are some symbolic things they started to change right at the very beginning of their governing after 2010, or some of them even in 2010, which is pretty much the hardware of the whole regime. They were changing the media law right away in 2010. Tanja was mentioning it in her introduction, how it looked like in Brussels then. Then they were changing the election law. It was a very, very important element of their politics. I could even tell that we did not even pay enough attention to that. But changing the election law into a kind of British style, first past the post system, led to a situation where someone with 44% of the popular vote can win a two-third majority in the parliament again and again. And they were also changing the constitution in 2012, saying that our former constitution was not stable enough, we need a new constitution put in marble, which shall not be changed anymore. And then they changed that constitution 8 times already until now. So this is how two-thirds looks like, really. Whatever he wakes up an idea with in the morning, by the afternoon, it is the new legislation in Hungary. So that was the software, the hardware. What is the software? It's also very important, and there are so many topics I could mention now, but I don't want to make a 2 hours presentation because I see that there are many people, maybe some questions will come too. But we need to speak about communication of the governing party, or better to say, the propaganda of the governing party, because that is a key element. But instead of talking about it, I would like to show you something. But before I do that, I need to teach you a couple of basic Hungarian words. Some of them will be easy to understand. So the first word in our Hungarian language course today is bevándorlás. That means immigration. Second word is migráció, which means migration. Third word is Brüsszel, which means Brussels, of course. And the fourth word is Soros György, which stands for George Soros. And you will see why this was.
A Brüsszelben bevándorlás, betelepítés, migrációs Brüsszelben.
Brüsszelből bevándorlást.
Brüsszeli migrációs bevándorlók, betelepítés, migrációs csomag a migrációval.
A Soros hálózat, Soros György, bevándorlás.
Migrációról. Immigrásokat, migráció.
A bevándorlás.
Migrációs hullámoknak.
A Soros hálózat, a Sorosféle.
Soros kapcsolatok, a Soros György, a Sorosféle.
A Sorosféle, Soros alapítvány.
Soros György, brüsszeli.
Soros György.
A Soros Györgynek, Soros Györgyel, a Soros Györgyhöz, a Soros Egyetemek.
A bevándorlás, bevándorlóország, migráns áradat, bevándorlás, bevándorlóország, bevándorlás.
Bevándorló migránsok Brüsszelnek.
A bevándorlás.
Bevándorlás vagy bevándorlás, a migráció kérdés.
A bevándorlás.
Bevándorló miatt a bevándorlás okozta.
Soros befolyásról. Ennyi a híradó 7:30-kor maradj.
So this was a cut from one evening news in the public television station of Hungary. This is the Hungarian BBC, and you don't have to speak Hungarian in order to understand what is going on. They decided to speak about one agenda and one thing only, which is migration. And then the Hungarian media situation and the whole Hungarian situation is ready to follow. And if their plan is that there is only one topic, which is migration, then this is how evening news in millions of Hungarian households look like. It's an important fact that the more rural a household is, the poorer a certain household is, the more likely it is that this evening news is the only source of information, because they don't have access to foreign media outlets. Most of the people don't speak English. They don't want to pay extra money for commercial and still kind of free television channels. This comes from the television for free. So this is what people watch in rural Hungary. And after watching such kind of nonsense for like years and years, after a while they will believe that this is the reality what goes on. I will show you a concrete example, a case study on a certain development which happened already 1.5 years ago, but it's still very relevant. And Tanja could tell a lot of things about that. That's the so-called Socialni report. That was the report based on what the Article 7 procedure started against the Hungarian government in the European Parliament in the autumn of 2018. This report was signed by, at that time, Green Dutch member of the European Parliament, Judith Sargentini. And that report dealt with a lot of relevant things and was criticizing the Hungarian government for a lot of topics which indeed were very, very problematic, starting with the constitutional and judiciary system, with the corruption going on in my country, with the freedom of expression, with the freedom of speech, with the freedom of religion, with the freedom of association, with the freedom of minorities, with the freedom of migrants also, and social rights, etc. It had several chapters. Out of them, one was migration. This was pretty huge consensus in the European Parliament. It was adopted by more than two-thirds of the that time MEPs. Of course, the Socialist group voted in favor, the Liberal group voted in favor, the Green group voted in favor, but also the two-thirds of the European People Party group voted in favor, which is very interesting because it's Orbán's own parliamentary group and European political party. So it was a European political consensus that something is going on in Hungary and we shall deal with issues. Now I think you could guess what out of all this criticism was important for the Hungarian government. This was the first and official reaction coming from Fidesz party. Fidesz is the party of Viktor Orbán for this report. Hungary doesn't let anyone to take away its rights to defend its borders, which means that they didn't take care of things written there about constitutional system or social rights. They were only picking migration, and they translated this whole report issue into the Hungarian evening news level that we, the Hungarian government, would like to protect our country from mass migration. And they, in Brussels, whoever they are, they would like us to open our gates and let millions of migrants in. That's it. So simple. And they were repeating this day after day. You couldn't watch a single goddamn football match in the television without having this kind of nonsense in the break between, in 2 minutes, in a nutshell. Migration was the only issue and it was coming from everywhere. When we had a press conference on the housing situation in Hungary and we proposed a plan on how to solve the housing issue, then the reaction of Fidesz was, yeah, the socialists would like to build tens of thousands of flats so that their migrants who they invite to Hungary have proper accommodation. Don't forget, please, that this is the main source of information, that evening news I was showing you before. A couple of more examples. They want to punish our country for our migration policy. Let's stand for Hungary. That's again official Fidesz reaction and communication on the Sargentini report and its issue. Sure, we managed to put together a kind of guidebook, how to be a populist person who is basing his power on disinformation, and it pretty much looks like the following. First of all, you need to take an existing challenge or phenomenon. No one says that migration is not a challenge. No one says that we don't need to talk about migration. No one says that this is a non-issue. All the political parties also in Hungary, and I guess everywhere else, agree that this is actually an issue and we need to deal with that and we need to find solutions. So taking an existing challenge, then exaggerating it until the limits, then creating a public enemy, and then putting yourself, like the government, into a position of the only savior opposed to the public enemy. I will show how public enemy looks like. And then putting everybody else on the side of the public enemy as traitors. I'm Fidesz, I want closed borders. You are talking about anything else, you want to have free theaters, you want to talk about housing, you are pro-migrant. I don't want my country to become a mixed society country, so please sit down and you're wrong. And then every criticism is coming from any direction. You also count to the camp of the traitors, whether you are an NGO or an opposition political party, or whether you are still remaining free media outlet, or you could also be the leader of the European People's Party, you could also be the traitor. And you have to keep this repeating, this constant war communication, that we are at war and we have to protect our homeland because others, opposition, Brussels, Tanja Fajon, NGOs, teachers, theaters, would like to change our Christian culture. So how does exaggeration look like? I think you saw that already. This photo was taken from Slovenia. What's interesting on this picture is that you see this little writing on the top saying Kormányinformáció, which means that this is not a party billboard, this is official government information put all over the streets of Hungary. I mean, every goddamn bus stop has this photo. Official government information. What is the information here? I think we all understand what is the information. A lot of people coming, they are not whites, probably they are not Christians, we have to stop them. Official government information. The public enemy. They invented the George Soros phenomenon. There are a couple of Hungarian politicians who, in the beginning of their careers, used to be supported by NGOs connected to George Soros to learn about freedom and to be able to learn abroad on scholarships. One of them is Viktor Orbán himself. He used to be a scholar of George Soros 30-something years ago in Oxford. He studied for half a year with the Soros scholarship. Now they realized that they have to have a face behind the evil forces, a face which is recognizable, a face which everybody is understanding. So they invented George Soros, the old guy who is originally coming from Hungary, has a Hungarian name. It's well understandable for all the Hungarians that, yeah, he's the bad guy, he's financing, he's plotting against all our government all the time. Then all you have to do is to create a savior. The quote says, "Some people want mixed societies in Europe. We won't let this happen." This is already election campaign billboards for the 2018 national elections. But it's still too complicated. You have to make it even more simple. There is only one question about the upcoming elections, says the quote. Viktor Orbán or the destruction of the fence. This is the real stake of these elections. You know, Hungary built a wire fence, or the government built a wire fence on the border of Hungary and Serbia in order to stop mass migration coming to the country uncontrolled. That wire fence has been their symbolic election billboard ever since. They are doing communication and politics with that wire fence, and whoever is coming against the government in any topics has actually only one issue and only one aim: to distract the wire fence. Still, you have to make it even more simple. You also have the traitors. We see on the picture 4 opposition prime minister candidates, which is a relevant question. Why does Hungarian opposition has 4 different prime minister candidates? It's also one of the reasons why we keep losing the elections time to time. From the left to the right, you see the prime minister candidate of the Greens, then the PM candidate from Progressive Liberals, then George Soros in the middle, then the PM candidate from the right radicals, and then our PM candidate. And they all group up together with George Soros with a wire cutter, if this is what you call it in English at all. And this is clear to everyone that these people are running at elections in order to demolish the wire fence on the southern border. Election day mobilization. Soros people have already voted. We shall go voting also. Imagine that enormous amount of money they have to spend on propaganda, spend on these billboards. I mean, if they upload this on Facebook, it has 50,000 shares within like 2 hours. Everybody sees that on the Hungarian internet, everybody. And don't forget, we are at war. Hungary doesn't let that others take away its rights to defend their borders. I mean, come on, actual Humvees, like soldiers on the southern border, it really looks like a war. And most of the people are really convinced that we are actually at war. And in war, yeah, the government should have more room to maneuver when they do politics. Sometimes there are also funny elements of this propaganda machine. Do you know what a tripe goulash means? I didn't know that. I had to Google the word. This is why I'm asking. The tripe is a stomach of a cow, you know, the actual stomach. You cut the stomach into slices and you cook a goulash out of the tripe. Okay, that's it.
We know what's thinking right now.
That's it. Bocol in Hungarian. So the Bocol gate. It's a very important part of Hungarian cuisine. I like to have it also. Now that talks began in Brussels, that because of the climate change, maybe we shall consume less meat, you know the drill, etc. Some NGOs are having pretty progressive proposals for how people should behave, mostly not companies, by the way, but that's another issue. I don't want to get into that. They started to play the strings, and they started to act like Brussels wanted to ban the traditional Hungarian cuisine. They were communicating, actually, that Brussels want to ban bocol. And then a campaign started on the Facebook. And this guy was posting photos of him cooking bocol in several environments. The guy is, by the way, the State Secretary on Defense. So this was the level of public discourse in Hungary for a couple of weeks. It was rather funny, but the results of it was not funny at all. Because we had the EP elections in 2019, May, which was a total disaster for the Hungarian opposition. Fidesz won the majority of the mandates, although it was a proportional election system, of course, free election system for the European elections, and the opposition went down badly. We only got one mandate. We used to have two before and four the period before. Some details about election results. In Budapest, Fidesz got only 41% of the popular vote. And it's still pretty high, but I mean, 41 is not the majority. 59 voted against Fidesz in majority. But this is not the case in some settlements. And I never thought I would speak about settlements such as Fáj, Tornanádaska, Csenyéte, or Piskó abroad. I think no one ever did before. But these are settlements, and there are plenty of them, like hundreds of them, where they got over 95% result. Vladimir Putin, I'm convinced, does not get 95% at any elections in Russia. Well, Fidesz did get 95% in Tornanádaska, because in Tornanádaska there is only one source of information, the evening news I was showing you. This is how it can turn people's thinking and turn people's mind. These are actual photos taken from the actual villages where Fidesz got above 95%. These people have nothing. These people, in most of the cases, don't have a glass in their window in their houses, not to mention heating or water or electricity. They have nothing. They are as poor as like 500 years ago. Still, they are convinced that the only thing they have to fear from is migration. And the only person who can save them from migration is Viktor Orbán. And it doesn't matter anymore that he's the same guy who keeps these people living under such circumstances in the 21st century European Union. Why? Why is all this happening? There are a lot of questions. What is the real goal? I would like to show you two figures. In Hungary, probably also elsewhere, every member of parliament or senior politician has to submit a kind of wealth declaration, like to make it public, how much money you have on your bank account, what kind of properties do you own, etc. Viktor Orbán declared this year that he has zero foreign savings on his bank account. I mean, this is relevantly less than what I, a local councillor in a village of 12,000 people, have. I declared relevantly more than the Prime Minister of Hungary, who has been a member of parliament for 30 years now, who has been leading a party for 30 years now, who has been Prime Minister for 10 plus 4 years already, which is almost the half of the whole free Hungarian history since the change. He declares zero savings. Why is this interesting? Well, it could be also sympathetic, like, yeah, the guy doesn't make his own money, we like such kind of politicians. Yeah, but there is a bug in the system. Two people. Lőrinc Mészáros is the older one. His personal wealth is 2 billion euros, which makes him the wealthiest person in Hungary, probably ever, by the way. Today for sure. The younger one is István Tiborcs. He only has 120 million euros. Why are these people so important? Mészáros Lőrinc used to be a gas fitter 20 years ago in a village, like a handyman fitting the gas machine in your house. He's a childhood friend of Viktor Orbán. He's the mayor of the village Viktor Orbán is coming from. István Tiborcs is as old as I am. He used to be a university student 10 years ago. Now he's also one of the wealthiest people in Hungary. He's the son-in-law of Viktor Orbán. I don't want to say more about this, but I think you can more or less figure out what I mean. Thanks God, we are over 2019 October, otherwise I would finish my presentation here. But I had to make a little update on this, because finally we see some hope in the situation. And as I mentioned, we as opposition committed a couple of mistakes, mainly that we did not realize that as long as the opposition is so fragmented in Hungary, because of the election law, we will never have a chance to defeat Viktor Orbán at elections. Because even if he only has 40% of public support, it's still more than what the second most popular opposition party has, which is around 50 now. Because of the first past the post system, you can win 90% of the constituencies with 40% of public support. So, the election system itself and the recent Hungarian developments force the opposition parties to cooperate strongly with each other, which actually led in 2019 October a full-scale opposition cooperation in most of the bigger and symbolic cities. I myself was a candidate for mayor in my town, and I was supported by 6 parties. I mean, sometimes I even had a problem counting all the 6 of them when I was saying in the beginning of public event who is supporting me. So now opposition realized that whatever we think about certain policies, and wherever we don't understand, we don't agree with each other, for the time being, it is not that important, because we understand in one thing, which is that we have to change the Orbán government. And if we have to unite for that, then this is what we will do. And we did it in 2019, and we won the local elections in a lot of settlements, including Budapest, which is a very, very symbolic victory, that now we have an opposition-leaning capital city led by our guy, by the way. Second thing, which was a pretty nice novelty coming from us, is that we have to think out of the box, and we have to try new tools which are not common in the political landscape. And we organized the first time ever opposition primaries in Budapest, where the voter turnout was 7%, which is incredibly high for a primaries the first time ever. And actually people were queuing up on the streets because they wanted to decide who will be the one opposition challenger of the Fidesz mayor candidate in Budapest. And everybody agreed that whoever wins from whichever party, if it's a Green or Socialist or Right Radical, all the opposition parties, and by this all the opposition voters agreed that they would vote for this person. And this is what actually happened. Our guy, coming from our smaller ally party, a Green leftist party, who used to be our prime minister candidate 2 years ago, managed to win the primaries, and now Gergely Karácsony is the mayor of Budapest. I think this is a pretty nice step one in order to change all this nonsense which is going on. There are still 99 steps ahead, but we have still 2 more years, so it's time to prepare. One last remark, and this is my closing momentum. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech. This is said by Benjamin Franklin. there is one thing you have to be very careful about in the beginning of the upcoming years, is that you don't let this happen in your country, that you don't let your own evening news become something like this. Otherwise, you will also have to live the reality for long years until to realize how to combat it. Thank you much for your attention. I'm here for any questions if you wish to ask them. Thank you.
How did society in Hungary change in 10 years? What is the biggest change of the country in 10 years of Orbán Viktor?
More than 500,000 people leaving the country.
500,000 people, young, educated.
Mostly. I have no microphone.
Yeah, you have your own microphone. Okay, so 500,000 people left the country, although there's still a fence and no migrants.
Because there are a lot of troubles in Hungarian society. There is serious poverty. Like almost 30% of the people live in actual poverty. The photos I was showing to you. There is a housing crisis, like everywhere else. Young people, when they get married and they start at their first jobs, are struggling to get a proper apartment. Not to mention they are struggling and thinking about how to start to develop a family and have children in such a situation. And these aren't problems. These are not. So these problems the government do not want to solve, because they are not interested in that, actually. All they want to do is to do this constant, stupid propaganda, because it's enough to convince their own people, around up to 3 million voters, which they possibly could have, to convince them election by election that it's worthy to vote for Fidesz. So actually, it's not only worthy, but it's the only real solution to vote for Fidesz. So therefore, you don't have to deal with any other problems. That's why a lot of people chose to leave the country, because they don't have a future. I mean, I was graduating in a high school class of 32 people. Now I know about 15 who are abroad, and I maybe don't know all of them. I guess that none of them will ever come back to Hungary.
Okay, so brain drain, lack of democracy, no media freedom, and a problem with the rule of law.
Yeah, and the election system, which helps this cocktail at every election. Yeah, this could be the. If you wanted to say the pillars of the urbanization, then I think you managed. Yeah.
Balázs, I have to say, when I was listening to you, I still recall how many years we were discussing Hungary and all the patterns you were mentioning, from starting taking away the freedom of media. 10 years ago, I remembered how much we were pushing Hungary, and there were just few cosmetic changes. And only recently we read that all state-owned media got a list, or the editors got a list on the topics they are not allowed to report, which I think it's exactly the topics you were mentioning. And me myself, also in Slovenia, I was for years, because I was dealing with migration, I could see exactly the same patterns. Migration, you get nicknames, you are someone who is inviting people to come, you are destroying your country. Soros, it's absolutely something that I am on the payroll for the last 6 years, which is an absolute, we are colleagues, it's absolute lie, and you cannot win this game, because a lot of these things people take with the emotions, the damage is there. There are certain media that are creating all this disinformation and fake news. By the way, now you showed 2 pictures I have also here that was from our media campaign in European elections used by SDS Party for Migrants. You most probably well remember, for example, this one, where Europeans are more safe, Paris with a military, or Budapest, where it's really beautiful. So these were also part of our campaign here in the country. So you see close links and some same patterns. But just this week on Wednesday, we're supposed to discuss in Strasbourg, or now in Brussels, and even now it's cancelled, unfortunately, the linkages of money from Hungarian companies through Slovenia and North Macedonia for the media that would be basically destroying democracy, freedoms and so on, closely linked to or Nova 24 in Slovenia, or some established in North Macedonia now ahead of the elections. Is that mentioned in Hungary at all, or how you are dealing with this media situation nowadays, where you say you have just national frequencies and people cannot get the information at all?
From opposition, you cannot really do anything with that, to be frank. I mean, we cannot compete with money with them. I mean, it's an enormous amount of money. We have some figures, but
Where does it come from?
no one really knows. I mean, all we know, the guy I was showing you, the wealthiest person, Lőrinc Mészáros, who became the wealthiest person of Hungary during the last 10 years, because he's owning certain companies, construction companies maybe, mainly, which companies run for public tenders, and somehow whenever anyone has to build anything, a road, a railway, a bridge, whatever, at the end of the day, it's him building it. I cannot unsee the connection between that kind of economical success of their companies and that the fact that those actual companies and that actual person is buying commercial media outlets and turning them into pure propaganda shit.
But were there any investigations in Hungary in that relation? Because that is also the question we are putting to European Commission, whether they will try to ask Slovenian or North Macedonian authorities, will they carry out investigations?
The media authority did a couple of investigations. Everything is all right with that situation, so there's no problem. But ask again about who are the people in the supervisory boards of the media appointed by a two-third government. They are not really independent. So again, as long as there is a two-third Fidesz majority, we cannot expect the media authority or courts themselves to say that this is illegal what the government is doing. This is unimaginable in Hungary. So first step is really that we have to outnumber the Fidesz voters. If they have 3 million, then we have to have 3,000,001 voters at the next elections. And then we can start to do the investigations and wrap the whole things up. From opposition, no, there's no chance for that.
Just because there was an Olaf investigation, I'm not sure whether you are aware, which put Hungary on the blacklist very high, abusing EU funds.
That's right.
Targeting them to certain companies. So this investigation, I think it's still ongoing, but I don't know if you know or you are discussing about that.
Yeah, there are ongoing investigations from Olaf. The only thing is that Olaf cannot put anyone in jail. Hungarian courts could. You can imagine how keen they are to do so. Not at all.
I was in Budapest a year ago, and I woke up and I saw news on BBC that the statue of the Soviet-era Hungarian leader Imre Nagy was struck down and moved from the square on the other side of the parliament overnight, without any public debate, without any legal reasons, without anything. They just went there and removed the statue. Are they rewriting history, changing history, reviving history? What are they doing?
Rewriting history, clearly. There's a certain period in Hungarian history between the two world wars. We lost both of the world wars, and between the two world wars there was this more and more authoritarian, conservative, rightist, radical, xenophobic, anti-Semite regime which was ruling the country and which eventually led to the entering of the Second World War on the wrong sides and to the Holocaust in Hungary and to all the disasters coming after that. They have a kind of nostalgia for that regime. They don't say it publicly. Of course, they don't label themselves pro-fascists or things like that. But they respect and admire people who were actually pro-fascists or fascists themselves. In these frames, they were making huge efforts, and they kind of succeeded not to only rewrite history, but to reconstruct the capital city. The parliament, the building of the Hungarian parliament building is a very symbolic building. I guess all of you know how it looks like. It's a very important thing as a visual for all of us. There is a huge square in front of the parliament, the Kossuth Lajos square, and step by step they started to rebuild it and remove everything and put their new things. And eventually it was clear, and then they also announced that they want to rebuild the square as exactly as it looked like in 1942. So this is how the square looked like in 1942, and this is how it looks like in 2020.
I ask this because there are some SDS politicians that also want to remove statues from Slovenia, and it's an interesting parallel of the rewriting history ideas of some of them. But there's another interesting parallel or question I want to ask you is what happened to the Central European universities? Like universities in Slovenia and in Europe are places of freedom, of places of autonomy from the state, from government. And as I hear it, it's not the same in Hungary, especially with the Central European University.
You know, they chased away the Central European University. There are still a couple of faculties, by the way, which can kind of operate in Budapest, but most of the thing has left the country and now is in Vienna. Two things. One was mentioned in your question, a center of freedom, as you made. This is unacceptable to have a center of freedom in the country of Viktor Orban. There's only one center, and that's Viktor Orban's party headquarters or his living room, I don't know. But there cannot be any kind of centers, not to mention a center of freedom, where they teach people to think, or to speak foreign languages, or to be able to access European Parliament resolution in English, or watch the BBC. No, this cannot happen. I mean, then how do we show that evening news to these people who speak languages and think freely? That's a crime. Secondly, it's not only about the university, I guess. Of course, it was disturbing him that there is a university partially funded by certain groups which Viktor Orban pretty much dislikes. It was a show of power. He wanted to prove the world, he wanted to prove Brussels, he wanted to prove Angela Merkel, he wanted to prove the Hungarian public that there is nothing he cannot do. If I want to kick out a university from Hungary, I do it like this. And no one believed. When people said, no, the European Union won't let this happen. Yeah.
Someone wants to ask some question, feel free to raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. But I will come back to the European Parliament, because today we are in the situation, we still have an Article 7. That was, as you said, launched in September 2018 in all institutions, with the majority also with EPP supported, but the governments, in fact, never found a consensus to launch really Article 7, because mostly it was always perceived as this is an atomic bomb to take voting rights and exclude the country from the EU. So we are today in the situation, we have an Article 7 that is really the worst or the very strong measure against one country. In case of Hungary, it's, as you say, independence of judiciary, freedom of media, academic freedoms, religious freedoms. It's a list of things. And you say yourself that in Hungary, whenever Viktor Orban was in the European Parliament, he came home as a winner. Because the news in Hungary were interpreted completely different. Brussels was usually the bad guy. We didn't have clear mechanisms how to act, because Article 7 was not sufficient, or the member states are in the political family still defending the government of Orban. Nowadays we have that EPP is deciding whether they will exclude Fidesz, but the deadline is spring next year, and I think it will never happen, as the Article 7 will never happen. So we are discussing to install the mechanism on democracy that would yearly see the progress of each country, but even that, this is a gap of the EU and the institutions. We cannot really clearly act against the regimes or countries that are breaking fundamental values of European Union. That is happening now in Hungary, and the same case is in Poland. Both countries are having Article 7 launched, but there is no consensus between the government. So this is a weak point. I don't know if we will manage within this new European Commission to establish this new mechanism for monitoring what's happening in our countries, but I think the formula you gave, unite the opposition, bring all these issues out, break the lies, break the disinformation, it's all the challenge for us. I remember how good it was to get the news that Hungary, Budapest, won the elections exactly for the reason that you joined the opposition. Still we have in the parliament 2 of your parties with 5 colleagues, and I wonder why you couldn't join at least these 2 socialist parties.
Well, there are a lot of reasons, but my psychologist told me not to talk about these issues publicly. Well, joining parties, it's one thing, but if all the parties can agree to support one candidate, one prime minister candidate, one candidate per every constituency, and having one joint national list, it could lead to a success. But as you mentioned, yes, we see that there is intention in the European Union to interfere into this somehow. We also see that it doesn't really work. And that's not the intention which is missing, but the tools. I mean, it's pretty clear by now that the EU does not really have a mechanism for such a kind of behavior. So the bottom line is that we mustn't sit in Budapest waiting for the European Union or the European Parliament or the next Commission to solve this problem for us. We created this problem. We Hungarians, all of us were there when this started, and now it's pretty clear for me that we are the ones who have to solve this. And then we somehow, sooner or later, will have to start to think about proper EU mechanisms, because I'm pretty confident that Viktor Orbán, he was the pioneer of this kind of behavior. His time will be over, I'm pretty confident, in 2022. But he's for sure not the last one who will try such kind of games. And if the EU remains like lame and watching by and saying how disastrous this is, it won't be serious enough, I guess.
We have a question. Domen, right?
Yes.
You have a mic maybe, or we have a mic to pass you? No. Then please just be loud.
Just talk really loud. Yeah. That's my feature, I guess. So hi, my name is Domen. I'm running a NGO called Citizen D, and I don't know if you've been told, but in Slovenia we have a bit of a in a way, we're better than Orban because we fund Orban propaganda with public funds. So we have state-owned companies and Ministry of Culture funds going into these Orban-related propaganda outlets. This topic is topic non grata in a way, that nobody wants to talk about it. When we are discussing Orban relationship in Slovenia, we're always connecting him with the right-wingers, and we're not taking into the account that money is flowing from Hungary across Slovenia towards northern Macedonia. But at the same time, Orban propaganda outlets are being backed by state-owned companies via advertising, via stuff. And I was just wondering if you could comment on that, especially due to the fact that the party or the party organizing this event has been in one way directly responsible for those funds going into Orban outlets, because they ran the Ministry of Culture and because they were in the government while the state-owned companies were funding these Orban propaganda outlets through advertising.
Obviously, I cannot comment on the second one because I don't have enough information on that.
Okay.
But there are others who can comment on that. On the first one, we are talking about the same economic groups. So the same groups which are now the owners of formerly independent commercial media outlets, are now buying this stuff also in Slovenia and Northern Macedonia, and following the same pattern which was done in Hungary, buying the outlets from some kind of money. I have a certain accusation on that. And then keeping these media outlets alive by government ads and big company ads, which are in a friendly relationship with the government. Meanwhile, not giving any ads to those media outlets which are not totally in line with the party line. I pretty much see that this is a kind of best practice and Fidesz people are now selling this to other countries such as Slovenia, because from their perspective it really works. And I think all of the wannabe Viktor Orbáns would be very glad to have the same media situation in their own countries.
Okay, and just to follow up, do you have any advice on how to encourage, let's say, the MPs in the national parliament or relevant publics to talk about that? Because our campaign has been going on since September 2018, and we finally reached a point where a discussion was put forth in the parliament. The problem was that nobody wanted to talk about state-owned companies advertising on Orban outlets in Slovenia. They all wanted to talk about, how right-wingers are in cahoots with Orban and this is bad, while at the same time ignoring a more systemic problem, because even if Orban, let's say, quits or resigns or gives up or picks up fishing,
we defeat him, let's say that.
He loses. The concept of state-owned companies funding these kind of outlets will remain, because nobody will shine a light on them, or nobody will discuss that in a relevant forum.
Yeah, I understand the question. We will see the second one, but regarding the first one, I think you have to start to raise awareness on how important it is, because honestly speaking, when this all started in Hungary about the media outlets like 10 years ago, nobody really cared about it, because there were so many other more important issues like changing the constitution or changing the name of the country from Republic of Hungary to Hungary. True story, by the way. And the issue of free media kind of got lost, because you don't really see masses demonstrating for this. Well, you shall make sure that masses demonstrate for this, because this is a key element, and I think you shall show this piece of evening news to your people, that if you don't act now, if you let this happen, then this is how evening news will look like in 5 years also in Slovenia. Secondly, about the parliament. I mean, the parliament is a very, very good tool when you communicate with your voters. Unless the public media stops broadcasting parliamentary sessions, which is the case in Hungary.
I would just like briefly to touch what you said, and I perfectly agree with you, talking about a state-owned company financing Nova24, what you are not very much informed, but I see it also as a systematic problem. We had an old media legislation, we tried to improve it, now we don't have it with the new government, we'll start probably the process again, but it's not only the issue. Nova24 is registered as a media, so we can discuss here how to resolve this systematic issue, as you say. But one question that I find also very worrying, and I put a question to the Commission, is that the big online portals like Facebook, YouTube, and the others are not publishing legal entities that are also paying the adverbs for these contents of such media outlets that are spreading disinformation or fake news. And this is also a big issue that we have to address as a systematic problem.
That's true, but I mean, if you're talking about Facebook and Google intermediaries, that's a fairly bigger issue than the issue of 3 state-owned companies in Slovenia funding Orban outlets in Slovenia, while the right-wingers are not even in power. We used to joke, we have a Balkan sense of humor here, and we used to joke that Orban needed the supermajority to achieve what the right-wingers achieved in Slovenia from the opposition position. So the Slovenian right-wingers didn't even have to be in power to achieve that state-owned companies funded their propaganda outlets through advertising and through other stuff. While absolutely no political debate was done on the matter, we had petitions leaked from the parliament onto the same Orban-related outlets just literally hours after we sent them to the parliament, and nobody did anything about that. We had death threats. I had people following me around supermarkets, tweeting at me, when will you stop, torturing the poor right-wingers about stuff and so on. So I'm just curious about the relationship, since the parties who were in power, they're not anymore, but who were in power were in fact, left-wing.
Well, Domen, you made a good point at the end. Parties is in plural. You cannot blame the Social Democrats for everything that went wrong. I know. In the previous government, one of the companies, or the majority of the companies, I would not see any Social Democrats there that you were talking about, the advertising. But we did prepare, the Social Democratic Ministry of Culture did prepare very, very good new media legislation, which sadly, because the government collapsed, or better said, because the Prime Minister resigned, will probably never see the light of day, especially with the new government coming in. So I would follow what Balázs was saying, is we need to cooperate, the NGOs, different political parties, on the left, in the center, that want a free and fair media system and want freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and not have propaganda machines instead of media outlets, which is a problem, especially with something American politics they call it alternative reality, and some other news stations, which makes life a lot harder. And as Balázs told us, about 500,000 people moved out of Hungary. Now that is what brain drain does to people. And if we look at Serbia again, Serbia with another illiberal regime also has huge brain drain numbers. And these two factors, I think, are connected in one way to another, and are definitely something we need to address in 2 years coming forward to the next elections. Any other questions from the audience?
Maybe,
former Minister of Culture?
Maybe only one expression, because one remark when we are talking about funding medias. The Minister of Culture is not funding medias. The Minister of Culture is funding projects which medias are presenting to the ministry. And it's not the people from the ministry. We in 2019, Nova 24 got 20,000 euros from one project, which is about news from all over Slovenia, and Demokracija got 20,000 from a whole budget of 700,000 euros for all the media around. And I think that we have to be very careful when we are talking about democracy and liberty of media and liberty of speech. I think that it would not be a very good sign that we are saying, because we are left, that we will not finance media which is right, or which has content which we are not in favor, or that we don't like. The two projects which were, there were 5 people from all Slovenia, professors from FDV, people working in the media, who decided that they will finance 2 projects of Nove, which is the main company of that. And I think that it's not correct that when I was minister at that time, that I would say, I don't like these 2 medias, and because I could at that point decide to say, I will not give any money to this media, because at the end, I could become the same person like Viktor Orban's people, which are deciding which news should be financed, which information should get money. So I'm not for that, and blaming that the Social Democrats or the Minister of Culture is financing media, right-wing media, but
Orban propaganda outlets, not right-wing media.
Okay,
that's not the same.
Don't you think this kind of political correctness is the thing that...
I think that's not political correctness. I don't think political correctness is that you have to see each project which is demanding for money, and if you see that this project has nothing with Orban propaganda, that it's good made, that it's good presented, that you have to give some money for that, of course. But nobody's talking about other projects the ministry is financing, because I think the bigger problem of the money of is what you said, Domen, before, is in all the Balkans, or even in Hungary, we have one big problem. Post-communist countries, the biggest companies which are in all these countries are of course, the government has a lot of power in that, and they give not 20,000 or 40,000 euros per year. They give hundreds of thousands of money for advertising at this media.
and I agree with that. There's two issues. So first issue is that the Ministry of Culture in question, so the amount of money isn't even the biggest issue. The biggest issue towards this case is that the Ministry of Culture legitimized Orban propaganda outlets in Slovenia by giving them our money. And they should be, even if you would examine, or even if you would take into the account the issue with the Razvit Media, the Directory of Media,
yes,
you would realize that those companies or those propaganda outlets have political backing. They were established. They were funded by the parties, and you would find a lot of red flags, to put it mildly, that kind of propaganda outlet shouldn't be in the media directory in the first place.
Yeah, on that, and I would maybe now break this discussion between the two of you, because I think we'll have opportunity afterwards also. But I very much see the points you're both having, and honestly, I would say it's a big systematic problem. When you look on Nova 24, it in my eyes couldn't be registered as a media, because it's clearly a political propaganda tool with spreading disinformation and fake news. I have abonnement for years every day with an article there, and you cannot do anything. So with that, I would maybe stop. There are two investigations, I think, ongoing in Slovenia currently on the money, with 4 million, just the recent case floating from Hungarian companies via Slovenia to North Macedonia, so through Nova 24 also, and through banks here, and that is other investigations. So I would leave it to that, and maybe if you still have on some other topic or related media topic for our guest, still some question? Yeah, please.
I actually have two questions. The first one is, for example, in other dictatorial countries such as Russia, what the government does, it creates so-called fake opposition, right? And I was wondering, there was no talk about Jobbik at all. Do you maybe think that Jobbik has become some sort of a satellite party which actually gives legitimacy to Orban? And the second question was also, you spoke about diaspora, which is predominantly liberal, right, leaving the country because there's no future. But as far as I know, I might be wrong though, huge diasporas actually in Romania and southern Slovakia actually turn out in hundreds of thousands to support Orban every election. So this is kind of a paradox. Does it maybe have to do something with Treaty of Trianon, the idea of Greater Hungary maybe?
Yeah. I start with the second one. Both of them very relevant questions. My answer on your second question is a clear yes. Yeah. Historically, there are a couple of few million Hungarians living around Hungary, but not in the Hungarian state. Those people were born in different countries, were having a different citizenship. Mostly we speak about Romania, Slovakia, and Serbia. By the way, 6,000 also in Slovenia. But they were like talking to their mothers in Hungarian, and they considered themselves as Hungarians. Fidesz saw the opportunity in this and gave them the so-called double citizenship. I mean, whoever can prove that he or she is a Hungarian, it's very easy to prove, by the way. For example, you don't have to speak Hungarian for this. The golden visa is something else. The golden visa is for the Middle East people. That's good migration. I mean, when migrants pay, it's called the golden visa, and that's good for them. So they provided a Hungarian citizenship for these people, and they also provided the right to take part on elections for these people. So yes, at every elections, hundreds of thousands of Hungarians abroad vote for Fidesz. The last time at national elections, 96% of Hungarians in Romania voted for Fidesz. It is annoying. It only affects 1 or 2 mandates at every elections. There are 200 seats in the Hungarian parliament. So this is not the biggest issue, to be frank. It's hard to do anything against. We make our attempts to go to Romania, to the Hungarian communities, to do campaigning for the Socialist Party. That's not the easiest territory for us. For the first question, absolutely no. Jobbik, and if someone would have told me 3 years ago that I, a devoted socialist, would speak in favor of the right radical Jobbik, I would have laughed or hit, I don't know. Jobbik split and changed. Jobbik realized 1.5 years ago that they have two choices. Whether they remain who they are, and they will never be able to change the government, and for their whole life there will be an Orban government which they can observe from the opposition position. Or they give up on the radicalism, they give up on hatred, they give up on marching in uniforms, which they did like 10 years ago. They move into a kind of, it's hard to define, centerish, Christianish something, but pro-democratic. They lose all the people who used to do this, by the way, and cooperate with other opposition parties, and then they can be part of the game. They decided the second one. Their popularity extremely went down. I mean, they used to get 20% 2 years ago, now they are around 6%. So for the opposition it was a gain, for Jobbik it was a clear loss, and some people, the radicals, split from Jobbik, founded a new party called Our Homeland, where the party logo is a Hungarian flag, and you can imagine what kind of policies they are making. Those are fake opposition. It happens so many times that there is something in the evening news. There is a government politician coming to comment from the government, and then someone from the opposition who turns out to be an Our Homeland person who says that we absolutely agree with the government, but these traitors to the nation, other opposition parties, disagree with us, but we shall do what the government does. They have like 2 or 3%, so probably a couple of people live well out of this project, but they are not really jeopardizing our big opposition project. One thing, this is personal. It takes compromises. I mean, it's not a coincidence that I'm in the Socialist Party. It means that I'm not a liberal, or I'm not a right radical. But I also had to make a decision that as an opposition politician, I have no other opportunity than to cooperate with Greens, liberals, former right radicals, not so social democrats. Otherwise, I could live my whole life during Viktor Orbán's government. And I don't want to do that. And I don't want to leave Hungary either, just as half of my friends did. So it was a hard decision to say, okay, I can have a Jobbik logo on my flyer as a mayor candidate. Eventually I did have one, and I am not proud of that at all. And I don't say I felt very well, but I understand the political reality, and I will love to have a lot of debates with Jobbik after Viktor Orbán's political regime is finally done.
Okay, thank you, Balázs, for that. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, in the back.
Well, you know, the state of play Brussels all too well. So my question is, if Mr. Juncker had the guts to slap the big dictator, will Ursula von der Leyen have the guts to kick him in the balls?
Whenever somebody is slapping Viktor Orbán in the face, like physically, it doesn't help. I don't know what Juncker's intention was with that slap. Yeah, it was very funny. I mean, I shared it on my Facebook too, that the dictator is being slapped. But whenever something like this happens, Orbán gets an extra 5% at home. So if you really want to kick the guy in the balls, then shut him off from money. That's the only thing you can do. Otherwise, he is gaining. Whenever he is going to the European Parliament, to answering question, and there are some over-enthusiastic MEPs with a good intention standing up and shouting and yelling at Viktor Orbán what a dictator he is, and half of the things they yell at him is actually not true. That doesn't help either. So in symbolics, you cannot really beat Viktor Orbán on the Hungarian level. The money, that would be something else. If the EU started not to watch by that Viktor Orban is financing his own regime by EU funds. That would be nice.
Okay. Can I add here, because we did make a decision that with the next EU financial framework we will have financial consequences for the countries that will not respect all the standards and values of EU. And you see now that with cohesion funds, the cut of 28% goes directly in the direction to harem countries as Hungary, who was the big beneficiary of EU funds. And we had a vote just before the summer break that with the new financial framework, the countries like Hungary or some others that will be in the breach of the Treaty of European Union will get less funds. But that will not hit, the decision was that will not hit the citizens and projects that were already approved, but the government that will have to finance them instead of EU money. So this was one of the measures, and I can say when we voted it was a big majority in favor, except of Fidesz and SDS party in the EPP family.
Okay, just another question. I'll try to rephrase. 10 or 15 years ago, Austria was under great scrutiny, under magnifying glass of the European Commission for having a government where one of coalition partners was a right-wing party, OFP. And well, from my perception, in layman's terms, OFP couldn't hold a candle to Orban. So how come nothing's going on now in that terms?
Things change. Jörg Haider would be a moderate Christian Democrat compared to Viktor Orban, that's true. By the way, I'm not convinced that that kind of approach coming from the European Union towards the FPÖ-ÖVP government, where Haider was also involved, helped the case at all. So you have to be very careful with these. As again, I mean, I really don't expect any solution coming from abroad. This decision shall be made by the Hungarian voters, and the Hungarian opposition parties have to provide a solution and an opportunity for the voters to be more than 3 million, and then it will be solved. I think it would be a wrong strategy to wait for that. By the way, why this is not happening? If it has to do anything in particular with the fact that Ursula von der Leyen happens to come from Germany, and that she happens to be a Christian Democrat, and there are certain German companies having a real good life in Hungary. That's another topic. Maybe we could raise that once.
Okay, Nicolette, and then we'll wrap things up shortly.
Yeah, I would like to ask you if and how are you addressing the right-wing voters? If you have any kind of special methods, and if you are actually doing it, because as you obviously mentioned before, anti-Orbanism doesn't work. The same as in Slovenia, anti-Janša thing is not working. So, is there any kind of methods or ways that the left sees to communicate and talk with the right-wing voters?
Yeah. First of all, voters at this point in Hungary don't think about themselves as right-wing or left-wing or liberal or green. They are pro-Orban and anti-Orban. At least 80% of them consider themselves like this. Secondly, one of the good added values of such a broad opposition coalition is that every party can do their own homework. So for us socialists, with a red flag and with our history, it wouldn't really be authentic to start to speak for people who consider themselves right-wings. Of course, we make some things clear. We also tell them that we, for example, love our nation. We don't want to sell Hungary to some, foreign capital, as it's being told about us time to time. But all the opposition parties have to strengthen themselves within their own voters now. And then when we add up the numbers at the end of the day, it could be a good cocktail that works. There's one thing we have to be very careful. At the end of the day, in 2022, there are going to be joint candidates of the whole opposition. So I have to make sure that I communicate in a certain way that in 2022, in my own constituency, voters who consider themselves rightists, for example, would vote for Jobbik, don't hate me so badly that they cannot vote for me. They will never fall in love with me, probably. But I have to convince them that I'm worthy of their votes, and even if we don't agree in things, and even if I will always be way too red for them, I'm still much better than the other option, which is Fidesz. And after winning the elections together, let's do the debates on which is the good direction. I'm not sure I gave a good answer to your question, by the way. I was not trying to avoid answering this, but it's really hard to give a straight answer.
Okay, any other questions? If not, Balázs, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.